Record to the cloud. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to one of our dialogue discussions with our independent dialogue coordinator, Catherine Fleming Bruce. She is here to discuss the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. And I wanted to go ahead and introduce her, and then I'm going to let her handle the conversation. And I'm going to mute myself and just take care of all the IT stuff and let her tell you a little bit about herself and this topic that we're discussing tonight. So if you can, Catherine Fleming Bruce, that'd be great. Take it away.
Well, first, I want to thank Atlantic Institute for making this opportunity available to a number of us. In addition to myself, I've served on the board of the Institute, and this opportunity came available, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the persons selected. And, I had separated myself from the board after that, so there'd be no conflict, but it offers an opportunity for me to expand the work that I was doing to improve and spread the word about dialogue across the country. So I'm so glad that all of you are here. I've been involved in advocacy and continue to be involved for many years. I am interested in history, historic preservation. I've worked on and continue to work on preserving buildings. I'm a writer, grants writer. I have a book that focuses on civil rights, historical sites, and the process of developing them. I also have been and continue to be involved in politics. I've run for office. Last year, I ran for United States Senate. And, you have to have a whole lot of money to run for Senate. And I think I did pretty well, considering I didn't have a lot of money. I was able to come in the top of 3 candidates. I did and was in a runoff. So I was very pleased with that. But I'm very interested in interfaith dialogue, in cooperation between organizations, and also in good governance, in how that dialogue can contribute to us having a better government, having better engagement by citizens, and having people able to work together for better outcomes. So dialogue is very important to me. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity. So today I'm in Washington, D.C., and I decided that my first topic should be the March on Washington. You may notice my buttons here on this side. I have a John Lewis pin, and I'll probably take them off so you can see them a little better. And I have an original March on Washington pin. So it's kind of a way to express a connection to the past and a connection to the current issues that still plague us, that we still have to talk about, and to ask how dialogue can improve those situations. I also wanted to show you a book that I have that was published in 1963. I'm not sure that you can see, but this was published in 1963, and it commemorates the march at that time. And so we want to move from that conversation to the conversation today that people will have after the march is over. So there are 3 people that I've asked to speak with me today, and all of them, I had to do a recording of the conversation because they're all so busy today with the march that I knew they wouldn't be able to have time to join me. So my first guest is Jonah Minkoff-Zern. He is the co-director of Democracy Campaign for Public Citizen. I've had the opportunity to work with Jonah over the past couple of years on voting rights programming. And by that, I mean, it's not just dialogue with one another. They really wanted us to have these conversations with people in the community about voting, about citizenship, about the conditions that people vote under, and how we could improve them. So he's done a number of things in that area. He's also convened or helped convene more than 100 organizations across the US in doing this work. So he's somebody who is a favorite of mine. I'm going to share my screen with you and share the conversation that we have had. So we're getting ready to do that right now. Okay, so great to see you, Jonah, and I really appreciate the time that you're able to cut out of a very busy schedule to have this conversation with me. So thank you.
Thank you so much for talking and for having me. I'm so honored.
Well, I noticed that the March on Washington has a full team of partners, and Public Citizen is among them, and you're in the beloved Community Partnership. So why don't you tell me a little bit about why Public Citizen decided to become a partner and what that designation means to you?
Absolutely. I mean, there are two reasons. One is just the importance of the march. I mean, this is a moment in our nation's history where we both need to commemorate the history of the Voting Rights Act and of the powerful movement and victories of the civil rights leaders from 60 years ago, and also where there's urgent need to take action to protect those freedoms and that were won, that were so hard fought and won, where they really are under attack by this movement of, for lack of a better term, of white supremacists and kind of extremist activists who are attacking our freedom to vote, who are attacking our freedoms of our reproductive rights, or attacking our freedoms to have access to healthcare and education, really our fundamental abilities to live in this nation. Martin Luther King III and Andrea Waters King talk about their daughter, Yolanda, who has less freedoms now that she's 14 than she did when she was born, and how in Georgia and nationally that they're under attack by these forces. So this is a really important moment to honor our history and the people who have struggled and led and fought and died before us for our civil rights and for our nation. And then also just an important moment where we carry that torch, and we recognize that we're part of the long march.
Right. And one of the themes is that this is not a commemoration that the March on Washington is doing, but a continuation. And I'd like to hear you talk about what Public Citizen is doing to make sure that this is a continuation.
Absolutely. Well, and we've worked so much together on these things, Ms. Catherine. We're working together to pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to have a baseline set of freedom to vote, of access to the ballot, making sure that big money isn't overrunning our voices in the election process, of having a clear code of ethics, of having redistricting in a way where Black voters aren't excluded from the polls, and where elected officials don't pick themselves, but the people pick the elected officials. We're fighting for those things together and to win those reforms. And we almost did it 2 years ago, again, I think I always go back to a conversation I had with Martin Luther King III, where I was in a moment where I was feeling really down and frustrated and just concerned about the direction. Before the election last fall, which went so much better than we thought it would. But he said this is a long march, and we have to, and that his father always told him that, and always taught that, and we're going to win. They didn't win right away, right? They marched and then they won, and we're going to march and we're going to win those reforms. While at the same time, we have to push back and we have to shine the light on the real threats of Trump and the MAGA Republicans, and how they are attacking election officials and threatening election officials, how they are building a movement that's more concerned with their power than it is in the sanctity of our democracy and the well-being of our nation. And it's like we're at this kind of cusp, I feel like, where either we're going to be building a multiracial, multi-generational democracy that our nation can really see, or we're going to slip into this authoritarianism, white supremacists leadership that they represent. And I think we're part of that struggle together. Me and you are part of that struggle
Yes,
together.
and I have my pin on today from some of our campaigns together. So I'm very proud of that. I'm also working right now, and this program is part of a effort by an organization called the Atlantic Institute that focuses on peaceful coexistence as part of what Dr. King worked for. And so I wanted to talk about dialogue and the importance of dialogue in carrying this action forward. And why don't you talk quickly about some of the dialogues that your organization has helped to make possible, and why you think dialogue might be a linchpin in what we're doing?
I mean, I think when we, so organizationally, I hope that we're helping to work with people around the country to support them as leaders and organizers, and bringing people together in their communities to have these conversations and to be leaders in this movement. And then I think like we can see with patience it's hard for me sometimes to feel patient. And I know it's hard for all of us to feel patient at times. I was talking to my cousin who lived down in an area in Rockaway, New York, where there are all these kind of extremists there. And she's talked about this lesbian couple who moved out there, and were just part of the community. And everyone started to meet them and build a relationship with this lesbian couple who is just like an active part of the community. And all of a sudden, these extremists who were really like, against them expressing themselves, against who they were, started to come around and started to realize they were human beings who they wanted to care for and respect and understood, and they could understand them and relate to them. And I think it was a beautiful story about how we can overcome their hatred and their ignorance, but it's hard. It's hard to do that, and it's hard to kind of be patient with them, and especially with their misinformation and their violent talk and things like that. But I think having the fortitude to recognize that things take time and that those transitions take time is really important. And it's just an important lesson for all of us, and something I need to work on all the time.
Right. Okay. So that was our first guest. And again, he's in the very much in the throes of advocacy, and excellent partner, both of our local projects here in our state, and as a national partner, bringing other organizations together and supporting this effort with the March on Washington. Additional screen share that I want to do right quick is to just remind folks that if they did not catch the information earlier, there was a recording of the March activities today by C-SPAN. So I just wanted to share with people that you can watch the whole thing. You can watch clips that people have generated. You'll be able to hear the speeches. And I wasn't I don't have the list of all the wonderful speeches that happened, but you can look, they have each person identified often, and you can tune into the speeches that you want to hear. So please make sure that you take your opportunity to do that. So now I'm going to go to our second guest. I'm going to hold on a second. I'm going to pull that up so that it's ready to go. Okay, there it is. Get that out yet. So, okay. Hold on.
I think
Okay.
if you are seeing something, a different screen, we are seeing the C-SPAN screen still.
Oh, you're
So,
still seeing that?
Yep, I think you have to go back and go share the screen again for that other screen that popped up. I've had this come up before for me, and I know it's like an issue. I'm like, oh, I pulled up a screen and it got rid of the other screen.
Gotcha. Okay, so right now I'm just you're not seeing my
Right now
screen.
it's just you. So right now go ahead and go back to screen share
Okay, so let me pull
and
the image that I
and
want.
pull up. Yep.
Okay, so let's start again.
Okay, so that's ready. And I'm gonna lower that and lower this and go to my screen share. And there it is. I'm so happy.
And then, yep, you should be able to pick that window.
Okay, I see the window there, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the person that you're about to hear next. His name is Jonathan Greenblatt, and he's the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. And he is their 6th national director, and he is responsible for leading all aspects of this world-leading anti-hate organization. So he became the CEO in July of 2015, and he focuses on securing justice, not just for the Jewish community, but for a variety of other communities as well. So very happy to have a chance to talk with him about the March on Washington, and let's hear that section.
That is quite the
Oh, okay, hold on.
that is quite the job.
Yes, okay. Hold on. This is the one that I wanted to share. Okay. There we are. Okay, I wanted to introduce everyone to Jonathan Greenblatt. He's the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, which has done so much good work for decades in our country and internationally. And now we're looking forward to the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington together. And I've seen the categories of partners of this march, partnership with the National Action Network and the Drum Major Institute with Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III. And the Anti-Defamation League is a co-chair level partner, one of the top 10 of those partnerships. Why don't you talk a little bit about why you're at that level of partnership and what that means to your organization?
Well, great question. Thank you, Catherine, for having me on today. I appreciate it. Look, I will tell you, I can't remember when I've been as excited about an event, when I've had such anticipation as I have for this 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. ADL is the oldest anti-hate organization in America. We've been focused on fighting anti-Semitism, anti-Black racism, all forms of bigotry for 110 years. Mm-hmm. And, my predecessors were there in 1963. Were there on the Washington Mall, at and around the Lincoln Memorial. Were there for that first March on Washington. And so to have been asked by Martin Luther King III and his wife Andrea of Drum Major Institute, and to have been asked by Reverend Al Sharpton of the National Action Network to join them as one of the co-chairs is without question one of the most meaningful honors that I've been privileged to enjoy in this role as ADL CEO since I took it on over 8 years ago. to be able to build upon the legacy, to be able to contribute to a moment when we will talk about, and really, you know, we have framed this march not as a commemoration of what happened 60 years ago, but as a continuation, because the demand for equal rights, the demand for justice and fair treatment to all continues today. And so to be the only, you know, anti-hate group at that table, the only Jewish group at that table, to be able to join with some of the most remarkable civil rights leaders of our time in that fight is incredibly humbling. And I'm really proud that we have the chance to be a part of it.
And I'm so excited to hear you talk about that connection with the past, a institutional as well as a personal connection that you can carry forward in your role. That's so much a part of, again, the continuation part of what MOW 60 is doing.
Yeah, like in the past, ADL, look, our first amicus brief was in 1947, I think, in the Shelley versus Kramer case, the landmark Supreme Court case that helped to overturn the laws that allowed people to discriminate against selling their homes to Black buyers.
Mm-hmm.
Our second amicus brief at ADL was in 1953 in Brown v. Board of Education, the landmark case that desegregated America's schools. My predecessors sent people on the buses during the Freedom Summer in the 50s. Again, we marched in 63, we marched in Selma in 65, like ADL was there. And that was the past. The situation now, though, is that in the present, we've got to continue to commit when voting rights are at risk.
Right.
When affirmative action programs are being challenged, when the same white nationalists who seethe against Black people also rant against Jewish people. We need to recognize that the fight continues today. And so I see the work that needs to happen now in the present. And I also see, Catherine, about what needs to happen going into the future. Because as I see it, if America isn't safe for Black people, that's not safe for Jewish people. If Jewish people can't worship, can't you know, whether it's worshiping in a synagogue or shopping at a kosher supermarket or just walking down the street without fear of being harassed or assaulted, then Black people can't be free. Then Black people can't be safe. Like, I think the only way we are safe as a community is when we are safe among all our communities. So it's not just what we did in the past. It's the work we need to do now in the present to build toward a better future for all of us.
Absolutely. And here in South Carolina, we have a connection that became evident with the Mother Emanuel shootings.
Yeah.
And that reverberated nationally. It brought people together in a variety of ways, but also in the shooting that took place in the Philadelphia synagogues. My understanding is that the pastor, Mother Emanuel, came to Philadelphia.
I think you mean Pittsburgh, right, Catherine?
Pittsburgh, yes, sorry. That's exactly right. They came to Pittsburgh, and the folks came from Pittsburgh to Charleston. And so that connection is there to continue to work against violence, against discrimination, against gun violence as a public health issue.
Let's recognize that. Like, we can never revive, we can never fully heal the wound of Mother Emanuel for the 9 people who were killed. Like, we can never revive, we can never fully heal the wound in Pittsburgh at Tree of Life from the 11 people who were killed. And yet, there is hope to be gained when we see how those communities in Charleston and Pittsburgh then came together, the bonds that were built. We can never revive the people who were shot and killed at the Top supermarket in Buffalo just because they were Black. Like, we can never revive the people who were killed at the kosher supermarket in Jersey City just because they were Jewish. But the hope we have is that we can learn from these tragedies and come closer together. I mean, I really think at the end of the day, Catherine, the only way we win The only way that we overcome is if we do it together. And for me, that's really the message, the powerful, inspiring message that we'll be talking about, that I'll be certainly talking about on Saturday, August 26th at the Lincoln Memorial.
And one thing that I want to focus on as well is the potential of dialogue. And the Atlantic Institute that I'm doing this project with, dialogue for peaceful coexistence is a big part of their commitment. So how do you see dialogue after people have heard the speeches and have come together on Saturday? How do you see dialogue fitting in to creating this future that we want to have?
Well, look, ultimately, we can never be there for one another if we don't understand one another.
Mhm.
And I think we need to recognize that our communities, the Black and Jewish communities specifically, like we have such a shared history. We have so much in common, but there are differences of opinion. There have been tensions, and that's okay. I have differences of opinions with my wife. I have tensions with my kids. We are all, though, even when you are in relationship,
Mhm.
you realize that you don't agree on everything, and that's okay. But it starts when you're in a relationship with listening to each other, with authenticity, with respect, right? And with a sincere effort to hear the other side. And so for me, yes, we will transgress, we will make mistakes, but I don't believe in cancel culture, Catherine.
Mhm.
I believe in counsel culture. When someone makes a mistake, you don't push them away, you got to pull them in. When someone errs, you don't eject them, you need to embrace them. And you embrace them and you pull them in and you counsel them so they better understand one another. And the way that that happens is through dialogue. So one of the most exciting things, Catherine, we're doing as part of this march is with the National Urban League. ADL is not only going to be in Washington at the march with 100,000 other people from around the country, but for those people who didn't make it, we're holding something we call Solidarity Shabbats.
Mhm.
So basically, we've partnered. You know, Jewish people do Friday night dinners, call them Shabbat dinner.
Right.
And we do a couple prayers, and then you have a family dinner. So I believe there are going to be Black Jewish Solidarity Shabbats all over the country. We've developed a guide. We're distributing it through ADL and Urban League chapters.
Mhm.
My hope is there'll be dozens, scores, hundreds of Solidarity Shabbats, not just this Friday night, where our communities dialogue and
Mhm.
learn from each other, but Catherine, in many Friday nights to come. So I'm really excited about that. I think the promise is extraordinary. It's going to be really pretty neat.
Well, I love to hear the idea of counsel culture, not cancel culture.
Right.
I really like that. And I
Thank-
like the opportunity every Friday that communities around the country will have for dialogue. So that's going to be critical. And we certainly want to make sure that the Atlantic Institute is a part of that as everywhere in the country. So I want to close up by putting in people's minds what it is that ADL wants people to do after the march is concluded. What
Right.
is it that you want to see people do, and around what issues? So when they come together, what issues do you want them to focus on?
So we're still, I would say, working that out, how that's going to be operationalized.
Mhm.
But so for me, the first thing is to focus all of our energy, all of our collective power on making this march a continuation of the fight against hate. So I want people to come together to stand up for one another as allies, and not just as allies, which that word is a little bit antiseptic for me, but to recognize we're all members of the same family, Catherine.
Right.
Secondly, I want them to come together on the issues that matter, like voting rights, to make sure
Mhm.
our democracy is no longer in peril. Look, people can vote however they want. I don't want to tell them how to vote, but I do want to tell them what to value. Things like decency, like humanity, right? Like just tolerance for each other. That's so important. So what I want people to do after this march, first, I want them to focus and make this march matter. Second, I want them to be prepared to take away the messages of fighting hate and standing up for your fellow members of this human family. I want them to focus on protecting and strengthening our democracy by defending basic things like voting rights. And then thirdly, to commit and to recommit and to recommit to making this country live up to the promise as laid out by its founding fathers. Not that it would be perfect, but to recognize that to be a more perfect union, we got a long way to go.
Well, having everyone together on this day, on this Saturday, is, as we say, a continuation from what people did at great risk in 1963.
That's right.
And
It's
still
so good
risk.
you said that. People forget that. Like,
Yeah.
it was bold to show up in 1963. It took courage. Like, we forget in the intersection where we live and where everyone stands for. No. Dr. King was not always revered. He was trailed by and spied on by the FBI. We had people in like Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph and you know, think about Julian Bond and John Lewis. They're lionists today, but they were rabble rousers in their time.
Right.
Like, we need to recognize their sacrifices and honor that by showing up and sticking around, starting with this Saturday.
This, yes, indeed, this particular Saturday is going to carry us through to reaching all the people in our communities who are not engaged in this work. And
Amen.
we're gonna fight to bring them on.
Amen.
So I want to thank you for the time that you've given today and the time that you're giving this week, and actually a couple of weeks before this march to get ready. We hope that everyone will be tuning in. There will be opportunities for people to watch. This show is going to come on after everything is concluded on that Saturday, but we intend to come home and reach back out to everyone in our state and say, it's time to work together. So what you're saying is inspiring to us, and we certainly want to take that spirit out into our community. So thank you very much.
Catherine, thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you for like being there and for your strength and for your courage. And I can't wait to embark on this journey together. I really can.
Terrific.
All
Well,
right, you be
thank you
good.
so much.
Nice to see you.
Okay. Okay, that was a great conversation that we had with the CEO, giving us the opportunity to share so many great ideas and perspectives.
I'm just going to tell you, I love that conversation.
Thank you.
And we need to get in on those Shabbat dinners, like, you know, let him know. So we can organize those. We can definitely help get some of those organized, because we would love to, those would be really great to be part of.
Okay, well, I'll make sure I get a message out to them tonight about that. They'll be excited about that.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, the power of conversation, the dialogue is already planting seeds.
Absolutely. I was like, oh,
great.
we can do that.
So our final conversation is with one of the leaders in the two leader organizations that put together and co-convened the march. So that was the Drum Major Institute, which is led by Martin Luther King III and his wife, and the National Action Network, which is led by Al Sharpton, and one of the national leaders, Reverend Nelson B. Rivers III, who is from South Carolina and who I've known for many years, who has given us a little time, and you can imagine what his week was like this week, but he was able to give us a little time to talk about the perspective of the National Action Network, his work as a religious leader, and what he sees as important to dialogue. So I'm going to prepare to share that screen. So let me make sure I've got the right clip and I see the right clip. Okay, we're gonna And so glad to see you. Okay, and I think we're ready to share. New share. Okay.
Good to be seen. How are you? Thank you for
I'm
having me.
good. I'm good. Glad you have the opportunity. And at this point, the whole day has been concluded and we can breathe and look to the future of
Yes.
where we want to go after this 60th celebration. But tell me a little about what your role was in the events of today.
Well, I'm the Vice President of Religious Affairs and External Relations for the National Action Network, working directly with Reverend Al Sharpton, along with Ms. Trudy Grant, who works in our department. She's the manager and I'm the VP. And we've been in this role with Reverend Sharpton since 2014. So this is our 9th year. Next year will be 10. And our role was to help mobilize the faith community to get the church to turn out and to get speakers who could represent the faith community on the program, and then to get it talked about in churches across America. Leading up to it, Ms. Grant's role was one of the co-leads of what's called the working group. And that was a group of over 160 organizations who helped mobilize, support the march. And the idea was to make the statement that was made by the size of the crowd, the messaging, and the assignments that people will go back home with to work with. I think one of the things that we don't talk enough about the March 60 years ago, Dr. King said in his message, and he listed the states, when you go back to Alabama, you go back to Mississippi, when you go back to Georgia, you go back to South Carolina, that's when the work starts. The march was a high point, but it still was a stimulant. It ignited. It was the jump off that announced what was going to happen. And from the 63 march, along with the killing of Medgar Evers 2 months before the march, 2.5 months, to the girls in Alabama being killed at 16th Street Baptist Church, momentum. Kennedy was assassinated the same year on my birthday, November 22nd, in 63. And those things started to happen in large part because of what the march did. And the other thing about the march, and we wanted to do at this march, was let the voice be heard. So much has happened to us as community and people of faith and people who believe in justice and fair treatment from all, no matter your background, where you live, your gender, who you sleep with, you control your own body. All of those issues that, as people of faith, especially Black folk who've been through all of that and worse, we have to be able to pronounce with a clear voice that discrimination has no place. The hatred of people because they're different than you is not gospel, it's not biblical, it's not Jesus, it certainly is not God. So that's a part of it. The other thing was, now let's go to work. We can go back home and deal with Moms for Liberty. We can go back home and deal with these right-wing takeovers of our school districts, because we had the clarion call issued by Reverend Sharpton, Dr. King's son, Martin Luther King III, and his wife, Mrs. Andre Waters King, and the organization Drum Major Institute, and then a list of others. You know, the president of the National Council of Churches right now is a Black woman, a friend of mine, one you know, Bishop Vashti McKenzie. She is literally sitting in an organization that has a Christian membership of between 30 and 35 million Christians in America, just in America. She's speaking in that voice, and there were others who spoke in that voice to be heard. But the idea was to mobilize, ignite, and inspire, that when we go back, not just fight the good fight, but fight a successful fight that will end up in a victory being for everybody, because justice will be served.
And the Atlantic Institute that I'm partnered with in doing this video today, their interest is in dialogue, across those borders. So it's interesting to me to hear you say you want people to go back and talk about it in their churches.
Mhm.
And people are hearing this message from the stage, and they're going to bring that back into their communities and have this dialogue. So talk a little bit more about the role of dialogue in achieving the goals of the march.
The dialogue is key. One great example is in 1963, before the march, Dr. King wrote the letter from a Birmingham jail.
Mhm.
And the letter was a dialogue with local faith leaders, most of them white. But what folk don't know, there are also Black clergy who are afraid of what would happen if Dr. King came to that town.
Mhm.
One of the reasons it took so long to respond. But the dialogue also happened in the jail. The jailers at first were hostile, just mean. But Dr. King helped them see that they were victims of the same system that Black folk were victims of. They just had a higher rung on the ladder, but they still were victims. And he said, instead of you all locking us up, y'all should grab one of these picket signs and go march with us, because what they're doing to you is what they're doing to us. They just got you believing because you're not Black, you're better. When in truth, you're not. The same folk who are oppressing us are oppressing you. And you just voluntarily being oppressed. And he made the point, the dialogue is what changed their hearts. It was not just his speaking. He wrote the letter based on margins of paper and everything he get his hands on, because of what he experienced in the jail. And the jail experience was about dialogue. It's different when people have to see you as human. It's different when people have to see you as equal and not adversary. It is different when the folk get to feel and see your humanity and not just their bias about you because of who you are. And their conclusion is drawn from lack of information and understanding. So when they go back home, there should be dialogue everywhere. Folk on those buses will be talking.
Mhm.
On the way back, they'll get back home. My prayer is that in places like my town in Charleston, we have a meeting already set for the 9th of September. And what the march has shown us, what the march has done, it'll give us a chance to deal with our school board issue. But not just those who feel like I do. Let's hear from these folk who think what they're doing is right.
Yeah.
Especially those who think that it's ordained by God. We need to understand how they got to think this way, because there's nothing biblically based about what they do. So it has to be from some other source. But without dialogue, we might not ever get to that.
And it's interesting to think about being in a jail, being on a bus, being in these different places that one would think are kind of unlikely places for dialogue. But every opportunity that you have to start a dialogue, to reach somebody that, maybe doesn't go to your church or isn't in a particular club with you, that's a great opportunity. So those are all wonderful examples of not only dialogue, but of taking that opportunity in different spaces.
Also, the dialogue has to be intentional.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of accidental dialogue. What you could say about King's dialogue with the jailers was happenstance. They locked him up.
Mm-hmm.
But they had, at some point, the dialogue had to be intentional. Mm-hmm. Whether they wanted to talk to him or he wanted to talk to them. And dialogue without listening is not dialogue, it's monologue. And so we have to make sure that people are hearing and then responding. And too often people don't hear you. They're too busy making up their mind as soon as you take a breath, what they're going to say. And so the dialogue has to be intentional. We have to intend to hear each other before we can then receive and understand what we're saying.
Yeah, that's so important. As you say, all the components of getting to the other side of a discussion depend on what your intentionality is.
Right, absolutely.
So I want to hear also a little bit more about commemoration versus continuation.
Mhm.
What can you tell us? Because it's so easy for people to think 60th anniversary and think anniversary and, you know, to kind of fall into those commemorative traps. So how do we
Absolutely.
make sure we break out of that?
When the March 1st was talked about, discussed, and decided upon, it was clear we don't want to spend the whole time looking back at what was in 1963.
Mhm.
It is what are we going to do in 2023, 60 years later. And so that's why the continuation is much more important than the commemoration. Yes, you go back and look at the old landmark. Yes, you go back and see where the Lord has brought you from. But God is the God of now. He is the God of the future. And he uses the past to inform the future. But he also expects us to act now. And so it's not enough to say in 63 we had that great, what is considered one of, if not the greatest speech, public speech ever given in the 20th century, was Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, which, by the way, started out as a speech but ended up as a sermon. Because as a Baptist preacher, he had to turn and go home. And Mahalia Jackson said, on the stage, you can hear her voice on the recording if you listen. She'll say, Martin, tell them about your dream. Tell them about your dream. And she was saying the same way you did in Detroit a few weeks ago, 100,000 people, twice as many people. Tell them that dream. And that dream was so powerful because it's lasted even now. So commemoration is remembering. Continuation is doing. The same way they did, it's incumbent upon us to do now. So we want to make it clear. We aren't just commemorating this great event of 60 years ago. We are doing something about what's going on now. The Supreme Court has ended affirmative action in my lifetime. It just got started in my lifetime. They have ended it to say that all these 300 plus years of oppression, suppression, rules, and illegal apparatus can be thrown away in just 50 years? No way. They reversed the student loan forgiveness program. They are adopting voting rules that intentionally limit the access of people of color to the right to vote. All that happening now. And as Reverend Sharpton said, it's the first time in history that a generation can say that my children will have less rights than I had. This is the first time. Every generation. In 63, Black folk couldn't vote in South Carolina legally. In 63, Black folk could not go to restaurants with white people. In 63, Black children could not go to public schools that had white children in it. In 63. In 63, there were no Black folk working in some city governments, no Black folk in police departments, no Black folk on councils. Fast forward to 83, all that changed. Fast forward even 20 more years to 03. And then 08, we got a Black president. Now, what the Supreme Court has done and is doing, our children will have less rights than I did. We can't stand for that. We got to move. We cannot allow something to happen that sends our children back behind the progress we made. That's why we marched.
And I'm thinking also all of these groups that you all have convened, from the co-chairs, you know, which includes ADL and NAACP and Urban League and NCNW and other groups, to the beloved community, you know, this large and getting larger group of, you know, fraternities and sororities and organizations that kind of cross a variety of issue points, the union groups, the Black church groups, you know, so many that have those chapters in all of our states. So we have this wonderful opportunity when we get back home to reconvene, but as much as we can, although some of them don't have a presence in our particular state, that's the time to make that happen.
Exactly. Also, the working group, which are over 160 partners, they had three main commitments they made and fulfilled. First was to amplify, talk about the march, make it known everywhere. The second was to mobilize, to get your own organization or organizations to turn out for the march. That happened. And the third is funded. Many of them invested in the march. They contributed. We were able to bring buses from all over the country. In some cases, we raised the money. In some cases, donors gave the money so that we could do that because they were partners. Labor was strong in this. As you said, ADL,
Yes.
this was not a Black march. It was the most diverse march like it probably in history. We had other races, other religions, no religion, other faith traditions, the LGBTQ community, our Asian brothers, Native American brothers and sisters. They were all there. And they were there because this is bigger than just Black folk. It is about the tilt of America against democracy. The wheels of injustice are turning backward, and we can't afford to go back. As Mars Mabley used to say, people always talk about the good old days. She said, I was there in them days and they weren't that good. And I tell people all the time, young folks talking about, we don't go back to the good old days. No, you don't. I said, I promise you one thing. If you go back, you want a round trip ticket because you're not going to want to stay.
Right.
You will come back to this. So we aren't going to go back to when I had to tell you how many bubbles in a bar of soap before I could vote. We're not going to go back when I could not go to the school that was the best school for me because of my skin color. We're not going to go back when Clemson was all white, Carolina was all white, and Black folk could not go. We're not going back. And one way to make that point was to march, protest, speak with a loud voice so that the Lord not only would hear our cry, but act upon our cry. Now it's up to us. We're back home. And the words of Jim
Ready.
Brown to Richard Pryor, what you going to do now?
Absolutely. And also remembering that I think remembering is useful, if only to say we have to keep fighting.
Exactly.
You know, these things don't, once we've addressed those issues and gotten to a certain point, we can't be shocked if the ball moves back and forth. We have
That's
to be
right.
ready. Just like our tennis players, the ball goes over here, it goes over there, they're ready.
Yeah, and we should expect that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and one of the things Reverend Sharpton said in our team meetings and said from the podium is the reason God always told his people, remember, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Though they were gone, they had to be remembered because each of them represented a milestone, a landmark, a step forward. And he says, as I was with them, so shall I be with you. But as with them, they didn't just wait on God to act. God told them what to do and they did it. For us, it is not enough to remember Dr. King, not enough to remember John Lewis, not enough to remember Dorothy Height. We must become, in our time, what they were in their time. So when God says, I am the God of Martin, I am the God of John Lewis, I am the God of Dorothy Height, the God of Ella Baker, the God of Septima Clark, he's also saying, I am the same God. And the way they work for liberation, you must do also.
So we have our marching orders, and I expect that there'll be a meeting like the one that you're talking about in South Carolina, that every state will have a meeting like that they can.
Absolutely. In fact, we already started.
Okay, so people want to know, if people want to know
bus captain
when
on the way back, talk on the bus, start organizing on the bus. We don't need everybody. We just need the right somebodies. And we have the right somebodies. They were on the bus. We're back home. Let's get busy.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm so thankful for everything that you have done in partnership with Al Sharpton and the rest of the NAN team, in partnership with Drum Major Institute and Martin Luther King III and Miss Andrea, the First Lady. Thankful for all that y'all have done to convene all of this and give us the inspiration to do the work that has to be done back home.
Well, thank you for all your work. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for doing what you're doing now. We need platforms that will articulate and amplify what we do. And you're doing that, and we're grateful.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be blessed.
All right, so we have had a fantastic series of conversations about the march, about the role of dialogue in the march, and also different ways dialogue can be imagined, done intentionally, and used to advance knowledge and insight and cooperation. So I'm very thankful to these three individuals who took the time to talk with me. I will say that we didn't have the opportunity to speak with Miss Afia. She was going to be one of the guests as well. She is someone who watched the march on television as a young person in 1963. And this informed a lot of her work since then. She told us she's almost 80 years old. And so even so, she was there today with us the whole day out there in the heat, doing the work, handing out papers, talking to people, educating people. So one of the things that I think she would like to share is that it's important to not only have these dialogues, but to repair any damage that has been done, to restore the people to where they need to be as much as you can. So restoration, reparation, repair, all the ways that we can look at that need to be a part of our dialogue. So with that, I'm going to open to any questions in conclusion. And I'd be happy to hear any comments from any of our guests today, or to take any of your questions.
I'm going to comment quick. So anybody that is on here, if you feel empowered to coordinate something and you don't know what that could be or how that could look, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Email me, because we will help you with Atlantic Institute. We will help you coordinate something. If that's how if you feel like, even I think Laura, you were in Italy, even, from afar, we can help you do that. I was just thinking, and while we were chatting, while we were listening to the last speaker, I was messaging quick I always get these out of the box thoughts that come to me, and I'm trying to coordinate a dialogue dinner in Greenville, South Carolina in September. And I've been struggling with a theme, and I asked the president of our board, or the chair of our board, can you give me a theme? Because I've been doing this for 10 years, and sometimes I run out of themes. And he made me think, and I messaged him and I said, what about a theme for the dinner of intentional dialogue? What can it create? And I already messaged Sean Dogan, because he used to be Sean Dogan in Greenville was took over at the Urban League for a period of time. Because I was just now sitting here thinking, oh, I could have somebody from the Urban League and I could have somebody from another organization be at that dinner and talk about what intentional dialogue and what can it create, and why having pockets of intentional dialogue and bringing people together has been the foundation of our organization for many, many years.
Yes.
So like
Yes.
that came to me in all this conversations. So, and I was just thinking I should offer it out there to Jay, to Carol Brown, to Laura, to Lucy, to Danielle, to Angela, if something struck you and it encouraged you, and you want to do something, but you don't know what, email me, and I can connect you with Catherine Fleming Bruce,
Yes.
or I can help you kind of brainstorm of what's in your area. Or we now have dialogue coordinators and a lot of a lot along the east coast of the country, but if you feel like something, yep, like Carol said, I'm more of a doer than a talker. Yep, exactly. I prefer to put things together and then let it take shape. I don't like to be the main speaker. So I can coordinate and put together certain things and reach out, and that's my specialty, that my God-given talent, I like to say sometimes, is to be able to put things together and have it take shape. So I like to give that to you all. Like if you want something like that, let us know and utilize us so that we can do that and help you. Because man, some unity would be nice.
Well, the opportunity is there, and I thank all of you for joining this conversation today and being a part of it. When it is available as a recording, I hope you will share it out. Invite other people to think more deeply about what they can do with the conclusion of the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, and how they can connect with existing partners to make that dialogue happen. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to Atlantic Institute for providing this opportunity. And I look forward to the next time.
All right. Laura said, thank you so much. I've learned a lot today. I'm planning on creating a digital badge program to go based on this. So is there a list of partners? So
yes, there is a list of
yes.
partners, and I'm going to tell you where to go to find that list. It is called MOW63. So that would probably be MOW63.com or .org. I don't remember right off, but that's where you can find the information about the march, see all of the partners, and reach out to them. I think many of and they have the logos there, and I think you can click on many of them. So you'll quickly be able to reach out, send them an email, and say, hey, we'd like to connect.
And Laura, send us an email and let us know what you're creating, a digital badge program. Sounds interesting. So if you could just send us something and let us know what that is and see if there's something we can do to help with any of that, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm gonna double check one more time to make sure I have that website correct. And I've been there so many times this week, you would think I would have it memorized, but I'm gonna look right quick and let it come up for me.
You can put on that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna double check that because it's March. Oh, 60. I'm sorry. Did I say 60? Yeah.
You
I
said
said wrong.
63, yeah.
Yeah, it's 60 and not 63. So I'm gonna put that in there correctly now that I have it up. MOW2023.com. So that will be your correct link to go ahead and make sure that you can find everything you need about the partners.
That makes sense. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions? If you wanted to unmute at all, you could. Just so you know, I mean, if anybody had any thoughts or questions. Otherwise, I'd like to go ahead and let you go because I think you've had a really long day and you probably need to go eat.
Yeah, I haven't done that either because the friends of mine who were on the trip with me, they said, we ended up leaving like 4 o'clock, and they said, oh, let's pull over and have some dinner. I said, no, you guys gotta drop me off. Because I gotta make sure I have everything ready for today. So yes, I will be eating after this, but thank you so much for the opportunity. And we had a great time here, and I had a great time sharing all this with you.
Yes, Carol said rest well because I know you're going to need some sleep.
Yes, I will. I sure will.
But thank you very much for all you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you. All right. So let me